I'm Patricia Allingham Carlson, and this is my video of how I painted Bucks County Farm. I live in a part of Pennsylvania that originally was all rural farmland. Rolling hills, farm after farm after farm. It's slowly becoming more and more suburbanized, and in some areas even urbanized as we move closer to the Philadelphia area. But as we drive out from this area, we still have many small farms, medium-sized farms, all with specialties and different beautiful, picturesque scenery. Many artists in this area are inspired to paint from these beautiful little farms, and that's what I'm doing here. After our last rather complicated painting, I decided to do something simple. A barn, snow, fields. Simple and peaceful. I hope you enjoy it. Give it a thumbs up. So let's paint. This is a fairly small piece of paper. I'm making a small painting, and I decided I really did not need a reference drawing, but I did need to make some reference dots or marks. So I'm using watercolor, because watercolor can always be subdued, toned down, even almost erased with a damp brush. I'm painting in lightly my basic horizon lines and my basic marker lines, where the barn will sit, where a front slope will sit, and where the sunset and the background hillside will be. I decided to make a sunrise or a sunset. I'm not sure exactly which one it is. But this is always a fun part of a painting. To paint the sky, I wet the whole surface down with water. And then I began with some pale yellow. In fact, it's so pale you can hardly see it. Coming in next, I mixed some cadmium orange into the pale yellow. And then I brought in some permanent pink. I allowed that to run and move into the cadmium orange and yellow color. And I painted it across the top of the sky. I was loosely looking at a reference picture of a sunrise, but I changed things around a lot just to suit myself, and because the watercolor didn't want to cooperate, I let it go where it wanted. After getting in some basic pale colors, I brought in some darker cloud colors with the purples. I think one of the funnest parts of painting watercolor is making sunrises and sunsets in the sky. It's also one of the harder parts if you want a bright sunset. Because as brilliant as you may think your colors are as you're mixing them on your palette, they tend to get lighter pretty fast as they dry. Now, another tricky part is not letting all the colors run into each other and cancel each other and make a dull gray. If you want to keep your colors fresh, you have to apply them and not let them run together in some places. Yet, if you need to blend them, it's more of a challenge. So you can see I'm putting the colors on, I'm leaving them sort of bumpy and not smooth. And then after it dries, I'll come back and smooth some things over that looked a little awkward. Now I'm building up the colors of the darker purplish clouds. I'm using some ultramarine blue and mixing it with the permanent pink. And moving down toward the bottom, I'm adding some more yellow. Now off in the distance on this hillside there is a woods. And I'm using a vertical stroke to convey these woods. I'm using some intense blue, and then I'm turning it down with some purple. And the ultramarine blue is coming in there as well. Moving right on down, I'm finding the lines of the central barn of the composition, and then the snowy slope that cuts it off. I'm doing this barn from a front-on perspective, which is the easiest. So I'm showing the front of the barn, the roof and the side, without a big distance or a perspective type of challenge for myself. The angles are straight on, and that is probably the easiest way to paint a barn. There's another structure just beyond the horizon of that little snowy slope. So I'm making the roof peek out of that. And then I'm chopping off the slope and making it very soft by putting down the color and blending it and lifting it. I do want this painting to be largely soft, even to imply some current snowfall. So you can see that I'm lifting the color, blending the color. I'm making these two snowy roofs. And then there's a background just beyond each snowy roof. And I'll be painting that in. And that will differentiate where the roof is from the background. A little bit more tricky than I anticipated. An interesting challenge. I'm firming up my lines of the one distant building and painting in the red of the barn. Now I'm going to be honest with you, I don't generally use a bright red when I paint a barn, or a covered bridge for that matter. I generally use some Indian red, some burnt sienna, and mix them with some cadmium red or some alizarin crimson. If a structure is facing away from a sunset or a sunrise, the strong color is behind the structure, and you're not going to get a strongly lit up red coloring. You're going to get something that is subdued by the atmosphere and the light. So like I said, I've mixed some Indian red and I've mixed some burnt sienna. In fact, I think I even mixed in a little bit of brown, probably a Van Dyke brown, because I want my red to be subdued and not a brilliant cardinal red, because it's not being brilliantly lit up in a broad daylight situation. I'm painting the barn in in a vertical manner because the planks are applied in a vertical manner to this building. The side of the barn that moves away to the left is going to be painted slightly darker by mixing in some more brown. And then I'll be putting in some heavy shading underneath the big roof overhang. And it's starting to look like a building. Moving to the other building, I have painted just above the roof line with some light blue, and I'm leaving the roof itself white. Just above the roof line, I am painting in some distant trees and bushes, and they will help set off where the roof line is. They also help define the difference between the background and the building. And now I'm doing the same thing to show where the larger barn has its roof end and beginning. With the trees behind it. I mean, I couldn't just paint a line because that wouldn't look very realistic, so I had to do it with shading. I'm doing some light shading on the roof itself too, so it's not just pure white, because again, it's facing away from the light source and will not be pure white. Building up a bit of color, and then doing the same on the other roof, or the other building. I'm also placing a medium-sized tree right next to the barn. That'll be a place for any animals that come out on a hot summer day to find some shade to stand in, or for the farmer to stand and get cooled down a little bit too. There's some low slopes and some drifts of snow. I'm painting them in with a very diluted blue and intense blue, and then washing them out with a layer of water. I want them to be soft. I'm doing the same with the background trees. I'm softening things with my water and my damp brush. I'm blending them as well. A little more detailing as I go on this central tree next to the barn. And I'm keeping the details very soft and blurry. It's not close up to the viewer, it's out in the middle of the field. And I begin to color in the door and the top window. I have a big foreground in this painting, so I'm going to break it up with, the edge of the farm perhaps that we're looking through, and some weeds. Add some interest to the foreground. This middle area I'm breaking up with some more slopes, and here I'm using Payne's Gray to change the color scheme a little bit, and a lot of water. I'm adding some more trees, bush line, but very soft and very low in the background. And I figure this will set off the roof of the building on the right. And then we start to see the roof forming with the background light coloring around it. Now here's a low line of what's going to be weeds. I've put down some watery Payne's Gray, and now I'm putting in some deeper Payne's Gray. Taking that same color and making my door. I'm also building up the tree a little bit and making it a little darker. Into the foreground I've come with some yellow ochre and some sap green. A little bit of burnt sienna too. Working very washy and very watery. Now using the same colors in the red family, I'm putting another layer on my barn. At first I think that's too bright, but then I remember it is going to fade. Anywhere it seems a little bright, I'm adding some extra brown to tone down the red a bit. And you see the heavy dark lines I'm putting underneath the overhang of the roof. That does help to structure the building. And then I decide I need to remove a little bit of color from that sunrise, sunset sky. So I'm taking some colors out and leaving some whites. They're coming out nicely. Doing some more blending with the distant trees with a damp brush, and some blotting with my paper towel. Just to the point where it looks right to me. Getting fairly satisfied with the middle ground and the background of this painting, but the foreground seems to be needing something. It just seems too empty and not tied together with the background. Yeah, I continue working on the painting and see what occurs to me. Tightening up the barn, adding some trees and some more definition to the tree trunks and to several branches, but not all the branches. Darkening the windows in the closer barn that goes, or the barn that's being hidden behind the slope. Coming in and painting around the door. tried to leave a little bit of white showing for a door frame. I'm using primarily Payne's Gray at that point. I'm putting a few more trees that are defined in the background as well. Those darker colors do set off the roof of the barn, don't they? Again, I'm getting pretty satisfied with this middle ground and with this background, but the foreground still looks empty to me. So what I did was I pulled out some reference photographs that I had taken in albums. I looked at trees and snow. I looked at tangles of vines in snow. I looked at different pictures and did comparisons, imagining them to be on my paper, until I found a photo that I thought was just right. I literally have hundreds of paintings, or hundreds, of photographs that I've taken as references. And they're mostly stored on my Facebook page in albums that detail walks, time of the year, a walk in the snow, with different photographs that I've taken of things I thought were beautiful, but then I use as reference photos. And I found the one that I thought would look just right, and I'm outlining it with water. I thought this might keep everything a little on the loose side, because I did not want to get super tight in the foreground. I wanted to keep things a little loose. Let the focus be on the middle ground. At the point where it's slightly dry, but still damp, I come in with a good dark color, and I paint a little tree. I've mixed together some Van Dyke brown, some purple, and some indigo. I'm painting in the trunk of a tree and keeping it on the loose side. Now we've ended the actual painting part, but I can tell you that I took a thinner brush and made the little small sticks of the tree as well, and did a lot of work with that until it looked just right. I also took some burnt sienna to make some of the smaller sticks, because I think using that reddish brown color shows a little bit of life to come. I hope you enjoyed my video, how I painted Bucks County Farm. I hope it gave you some ideas for your own work and maybe gave you some things to try yourself. There's some links below that you can check out if you want to see some other places that I have on YouTube, on Facebook. I have links to products that I use, links to my Facebook page, where I do have many reference albums that are there for people to take a look and get ideas and inspired. As always, I appreciate your thumbs up, your likes, and if you subscribe, you won't miss any future videos. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you next painting.